I've been wondering what it really is, or what it even is, toxic positivity. What does it actually mean, and what does it really look like? And so I did some Googling and research, and so let's talk about that. So the first time I heard the phrase toxic positivity, I was like, what? How can positivity be toxic? Like, it's good to be positive and to have a positive frame of mind and have a positive view of the world and all of those things. And it just confused me, like the concept and the idea. But then when I did all my reading, which was basically like 30 minutes of Google searching, I realized that, okay, I see what people mean when they say toxic positivity. So while I believe that having a positive view of life and being positive and having a positive outlook and everything is very important, I also believe that this doesn't mean that negative things don't happen or exist, or that you have to avoid your quote unquote negative emotions and thoughts, and that you can never ascribe anything negative to any situation. So when you think about toxic positivity, is where you're like, do not think about anything that is negative ever. Do not think, don't be sad, don't think about, like, don't respond to events that should be sad or that can feel overwhelming in such a manner. And also basically dismiss when other people feel that way. And in every situation, just say positive things, just like positive thoughts, positive thoughts, positive thoughts, and don't actually think about like the situation, or ignore all the things that are going wrong and just be like la 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 la. And I talked about it a bit in the episode on being delusional versus having faith. And that is like actually not a good way to live, to like literally be living in la la land. Toxic positivity basically also sounds to me like being delusional, which is also not a good thing to be. And toxic positivity can come from the wanting to make everything better quickly and thinking that ignoring it makes it better, or the idea that being negative, quote unquote, is a bad thing, or having negative thoughts about anything is a bad thing. And so it's basically things that we learn, especially if you had like childhood trauma or you experience painful things in your childhood. There can also be that tendency to be like, I'm just going to ignore it and live in my own world and everything is fine and nice and everything. So I don't think that emotions are bad or good. They're just emotions, and you can feel sad and you can feel stressed and you can feel regrets, you can feel angry, you can feel all those kinds of quote unquote negative feelings. But the thing that you should do then, or I think what people should do when they have those feelings, is to acknowledge those feelings, think about why you're having those feelings, and then think about what you can do afterwards. Like, don't wallow in the feelings, but then don't also like ignore them and pretend they don't exist, because that's where, like, in both extremes, it's like there's a line, and there's on one end pretending like the feeling is not there and doesn't exist, and then the other end is like just living there and not moving, like building your house and your life in that place instead of moving. Those two extremes, not great. There's a middle ground, a better way, so to say, and that is the framing that I've come to really enjoy, which is the fortunately unfortunately framing. And I really love the fortunately unfortunately framing because it helps you to like acknowledge the situation at hand. Like, so let's say you're supposed to go somewhere and there was traffic and you missed your train or your bus, or there was a delay and then now you're late and whatever happens. So in the fortunately unfortunately framing, you're basically going to like, okay, now I'm upset because the train was late or I missed the train or whatever. But fortunately, it means I had more time with my friend, for example. Usually, when people do fortunately, unfortunately, when I've seen it happen, people usually start with the fortunately side, which I think is weird. I think like starts with the unfortunately side because it's the thing that went wrong, is the annoying thing, the upsetting thing, the thing that you wish could change, and then talk about the positive part of it. And this is good because you're not ignoring the negative, quote unquote, negative, frustrating, annoying, sad situation, but you're also finding something from that place, something about that experience that is good or that could be good. So, fortunately, unfortunately, or more appropriately, unfortunately, fortunately, is something that you should at least start doing with yourself. Not like when other people are talking about, like, oh, this has happened to me, or they feel sad, or whatever. Then you're like, well, fortunately, unfortunately, or whatever. Allow people also have room to express themselves and talk about how they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're experiencing without trying to like fix it or solve it, which is also, I think, where toxic positivity also stems from. Sometimes it's not even just to ourselves as individuals, like it's not something you say to yourself or do to yourself. Oftentimes it's also in how we talk to other people when they are experiencing some kind of difficult situation, and then you say things like, oh, it was all for the best, you get through it, everything happens for a reason, blah blah blah, which can be very irritating to somebody who is experiencing a difficult situation, whether personally, at work, in school, in their life, whatever. That is not helpful to anybody, because then it seems like you're discounting their emotions. And it's also because I think many of us don't know how to handle negative emotions or hard situations for people. And in those cases, it's better to just be silent. Like, say, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry you experienced that. And just listen. Like, you don't have to jump to the rescue or try to fix it by encourage them to be positive or whatever. Like, just allow it in the moment. Although at the same time, I do think that in some scenarios, it gets to a point where you have to tell your friend. Like, if your friend is like going through a really bad thing and they've grieved and mourned, depending on what it is, I do think that there's a point where you have to like tell your friend that, okay, this has happened to you, it's really bad, I'm really sorry, we've mourned, we've cried, what do you want to do next, or how are you feeling next, or like validating, after validating what they've experienced, like then suggest like, okay, what do you want to do, or how do you want me to help you now, or what do you want me to do with you at this moment, because we don't want people that we love, or we don't even want ourselves to like sleep or build houses and homes in the negative emotional side, and sometimes it requires professional help, like therapists, counselors, that kind of thing, and we can lead them in that direction. But I think it's very, very important to acknowledge the negative stuff, quote unquote negative emotions. I don't know, I don't like calling emotions negative or positive, because they're just emotions. Like, you just feel how you feel and you work through that and figure it out, whatever. But yeah, like just giving room to grieve whatever they may be grieving, whether it's the loss of a loved one or the loss of a job or a change in direction of their lives, whatever it may be, and then helping them get professional help if they need. That's it for today. Okay. Bye. Here's your regular reminder that I am accepting questions for the podcast. So please submit a question through the link in the description or the show notes, and I will answer in a future episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of A Couple of Things with Lade Tawag. If you enjoyed any part of this episode or found any part of it useful or insightful, please leave a comment if you can on your podcast listening app. Like, subscribe, all the nice things, and of course share with someone, anyone at all. Thank you. Bye. Hi, welcome to today's episode of A Couple of Things. And today, I think I'm just gonna, I don't know,